Welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, the show about building a healthier relationship with modern technology. Now, here are your hosts, R. Blank and Stephanie Warner.
Today, we're honored to have a true trailblazer in the realm of electromagnetic field protection and home wellness, Andrew McAfee. Based in Raleigh, North Carolina, Andrew's journey is a testament to turning personal challenges into a quest for solutions. A seasoned EMF consultant, Andrew's story began with the realization: health issues tied to wiring problems in his own home. After moving into a brand new home, Andrew and his wife became electrically sensitive in 2001. He was fortunate to have Charles Keene and Carl Riley as early mentors. Beginning in 2010, Andrew successfully petitioned the North Carolina Utility Commission to order Duke Energy to provide a no-cost, non-emitting meter for its customers. After 15 years as principal horn of the North Carolina Symphony, earning a master's degree in conducting, and 10 years as professor of music at UNC Chapel Hill, which rejected me for undergrad, he left music to help others with ES. Andrew was featured in a 2014 Time docufilm, Searching for a Golden Cage, about electro-sensitivity. In 2017, he made the leap to become a full-time EMF consultant, channeling his knowledge into creating safer living spaces for all. Utilizing electrical training materials from Mike Holt, Andrew earned a residential electrician's career diploma in Penn Foster's year-long program in 2019. In 2020, he wrote 6 short books as part of his Killing Current series to raise awareness about the dangers of contact current. And in 2021, he co-created a web course, Staying Healthy in a 5G World. Fast forward to today, and Andrew stands as the innovative mind behind the NCB Pro, a groundbreaking solution reshaping the landscape of home grounding safety. With a career diploma in residential electricity, he brings a unique blend of expertise and passion to the world of EMF protection. He currently works full-time for Bonneville Electric as a project manager and service technician, and has earned an OSHA 10 safety certification. And that's just an extract of everything I could have said about Andrew. But without further ado, welcome to the Healthier Tech Podcast, Andrew.
Thank you, R. and Stephanie, for having me. It's my pleasure.
It's always a pleasure to catch up with you.
Yeah, we're really excited to talk to you and to introduce you to our listeners. All right. So I wanted to jump in first. We heard this, wonderful introduction, and I wanted to kind of pull back a little bit. You talked about how your journey kind of started because you and your wife became electrosensitive. Can you explain to our listeners what electrosensitive is?
Yes. So we were freshly married and moved into a brand new home, which you expect to be perfectly wired. And within 6 months, we both started feeling fatigue. We had dark circles under our eyes. And between 5 and 7 p.m., we would having mood swings and feeling this heaviness around us. And at night, I was getting like sensations that things were crawling on my skin. And I was having burning skin. So I had these sensations. And my wife, too, was like, something doesn't feel right. So that's the beginning of electrical sensitivity, as the body was giving us information, some sensations that, this is not typical. And then things increased from there. But the first sign were these symptoms.
Yeah, absolutely. And the symptoms that you're describing, like, they seem, well, honestly, they sound, disturbing. Crawling skin definitely sounds awful. Mood swings. But even to be aware of these things is one thing. Sometimes we take our health and, whatever comes, we don't necessarily think about, what the cause is. But to how did you get from these issues are happening to this is electrosensitivity? How did you figure it out?
It's a great question. My wife was able to call around because we suspected it was a radio tower that was near our home, because we started to actually feel it as we would drive by it. It's like, well, that's weird. I can feel this energy hovering around my head, and our cell phones started to hurt our ears, and we'd feel heat. So we suspected it was the radio tower. So my wife was able to find Charles Keene, And serendipitously, he was traveling from Florida to New York the very next day. He came over to our home, spent all day with us, and he actually found all of these wiring problems in our home that causing really high magnetic fields and contact current issues where you touch something and you're actually, getting electrocuted, like 9 volts in our bed and all these other issues. So it then became focused on our home wiring.
That's interesting that you had some cues. Well, I understand that. We'll jump back to this a little bit more and what you did to solve these problems. But it sounds like your journey kind of sparked a mission in you. Can you tell our listeners what you're setting out to accomplish now based on this experience and the journey that we'll talk about later of how you solved these problems?
Sure. I was principal horn of the North Carolina Symphony. I was a big performer in a somewhat major orchestra, and I had sights on becoming a major conductor, a waving baton, and I was doing some very intense, very expensive, global traveling to get conductor experience and workshops and everything. So my vanity was extremely, huge, and I was going to be famous. But this electrical sensitivity pretty much made me impossible to be around. And at work, asking people to turn their cell phones off, and then people using Wi-Fi more and more on stages for performance, I was unable to perform at my ability. So I just became extremely annoying to staff, management, and even at UNC, I was able to work out with a technician there how to turn off the Wi-Fi routers. So as you can expect, nobody wants to be around somebody that can't be around cell phones or anything. So as a performer, as a musician, you're supposed to be this elitist sort of personality that you're better than everything and nothing bothers you and you're aloof and above everything. But a person with a bunch of health problems and that's like asking you to turn your cell phones off, that's not really global conductor material. So I then got very pissed off that, this is taking my dreams away from me. And at that point, I really dug into helping other people because I found a way that I could bolster and justify why is this happening to me? But I felt really, really good helping other people because I understood at least what was going on with me to some extent, and I could help other people get out of the situation. So my whole life transisted from this vanity of just me, you look at me special, to one of service and helping other people.
That's cool. Because you and I have now known each other for a couple of years, and I'd never heard that sort of emotional impact part of your story. And I know that for the number of people who contact me and contact Shield Your Body and Healthier Tech with electrical sensitivity issues, I think part of the frustration is an emotional response about people believing you, the impacts on your life, the lack of fairness in how this all plays out. I'm wondering, do you still consider yourself to be electrically sensitive? Is that something you feel that you can, like you're treating it, or it's gone?
I'm absolutely electrically sensitive. I tell people I'm recovered somewhere between 85 and 90%. So I can tolerate much more than I could when I was at my worst, let's put it that way. But I definitely have trouble sleeping. I can tell when your cell phone's on around me. I'm struggling with the power grid right now. It's increased about 3 times the magnetic field on my property. So, wow. And my wife and I both, we sort of, fortunately, we sort of go like this. One person will go down and the other person is strong enough to care for the other. So we've had a very good symbiotic relationship, supporting each other. Infections, Epstein-Barr, and other things that are directly related to electrical exposures. We suffer chronically. So we're doing treatments all the time in order to stay above and ahead of the infections and the other symptoms, chronic fatigue and other types of headaches and everything. The amount of money we spend every month just to keep the inflammation down and to process everything is still significant, but nothing like it used to be.
So we're about to get into a part of the conversation where there's a term that's going to come up I think, repeatedly, and that is dirty electricity. And I think even in the EMF space, where a fair number of people have heard that term, there's still a fair amount of confusion about what it means. So, how would you define what dirty electricity is in generally accessible terminology?
Sure. If you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen, and
Sure.
I'm going to
And
do a
this is so
visual
anyone
here.
who's listening to this will be in the video, and the link to that will be in the show notes.
Great. Can you see the dirty electricity here?
Yes.
Yes.
So around 60 hertz, 60 hertz is 60 pulses a second. The power grid delivers electricity to our homes. So that creates an electric field and a magnetic field. And the power companies are very good at delivering clean power. Clean power is basically 60 pulses a second. Boom, you're done. Anything other than 60 pulses forward with the current, it's AC, it pulses forward and backwards. It's actually 120 times a second forward and then back. So that's twice per cycle, 60 forward per second. So just the technical people out there are going to call me on that. So anything other than the 60 hertz or 60 cycles a second is going to be called dirty electricity. So DE, or dirty electricity, is usually what are called harmonics. So it's very easy. You just take 60 and you multiply it times some odd number, like 3. So 3 times 60 is 180. So 180 hertz would be dirty electricity. And it's a very common frequency that you'll see caused by various appliances. But I'm just going to say it's just a harmonic. And then let's say 5, the fifth harmonic, 5 times 60, 300. So if you see a frequency of 300 on your electricity, that's the fifth harmonic, and that is dirty electricity.
Okay, so can I jump in here for a quick second? So, and this is, I think, interesting. When the power leaves the utility, you said in general these utilities are quite good at making it clean. Is that actually true? So, the pollution on the power line is not present at the source.
That is correct. It happens on the grid.
As it travels the grid. Yeah, and what causes these harmonics?
In the most simplest form, a motor or a light like an LED, or especially fluorescent lights, they're called non-linear appliances or non-linear loads. Now, why is it non-linear? If something is linear, it's very predictable. It just increases at a very consistent rate. You change the voltage, which is basically the pressure, and the current will absolutely crawl exactly along with the voltage. Now, with LEDs, light emitting diodes, or LED lights, everybody's familiar with that, or other non-linear loads, as you increase the voltage or you change any variable, all of a sudden the other variable of current or whatever is completely separated from the voltage, and they will increase at completely different rates. And that is not lined up. So this creates a distortion field or other types of spikes that is wearing down materials, wearing down motors, heating up conductors, heating up wires. It fatigues everything on the electrical side, as well as the human body, and infections, and especially infections in the body, are exacerbated. Our probiotics, our beneficial bacteria in our body, once they experience these frequencies hitting them, they get very defensive and they get pissed off and they start to create poisons, or they alter to cohabitate in this negative, bad environment. So they become evil themselves.
Now, a few minutes ago, you mentioned that recently the magnetic field emissions from the power on your property have, I think you said tripled. They've significantly increased, and that is causing you problems. Just to be clear, for myself and for the listeners, an increased level in magnetic fields, that's different Right. That's a different issue from dirty electricity. Or is it?
It's actually related in that around 60 hertz, you have two basic phenomenon. Whenever you have current flowing, current is basically the movement of charges. They could be positive charge or negative charge, whatever it is. It's just the movement of charges. It could be electrons that are moving in a wire. We call that current. So if current is flowing, it creates a magnetic field. So whenever you have a magnetic field, there's current moving. There's charges moving. In the wave form, you will have dirty electricity. So you can have a magnetic field, and inside of that magnetic field is a bunch of dirty electricity. So the magnetic field cuts through basically any material. Now, electrical engineers, just pause, just chill out for a second. Just, we're not talking about lead and close containers and nickel and cobalt and all that kind of stuff, protection stuff, but just in general, a magnetic field is going to cut through any material, your body included, and it's going to deliver these other frequencies because current creates a magnetic field. Mm-hmm. And in the magnetic field, you're going to have the current wave. So you'll have these harmonics of current riding in the magnetic field, which is cutting right into your body, which brings those frequencies right into your cells.
Okay. So in a second here, we're going to get into the house, but still from the grid perspective, is there anything that the utilities, that the entities managing, designing, implementing, and managing the grid, is there anything they could actually do to reduce dirty electricity, given the way in which they're producing it clean, and it's being the dirt is being generated by things outside of their control, like the lighting in your house and the motors in your house. Is there anything the utilities could do to make the grid cleaner?
In general, yes. It's not their fault most of the time. They inherit problems from industry, from pool pumps, from variable frequency drives, all kinds of different appliances that homeowners have, and that gets spilled back onto the grid, and then other people inherit it. It just they adopt it. It comes into your house. So the grid is very dirty because of all of this garbage. The power companies could do a little bit of filtering, and they do. They have capacitors. They have these things of sort of altering. Now that all of these non-linear loads are on the power lines, it changes how the power is distributed to some extent. So they do adjust the power on the lines according to these problems. But it's not really their fault. Mm-hmm. They have other problems that are much, much worse because of the return current wire gets overwhelmed by all these nonlinear loads. It gets pushed into the earth. And this is where I developed the NCB, is to block a lot of these harmonics and other types of dirty electricity. It gets onto our grounding system. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of other things that the power companies do that creates excessive magnetic fields, loops between transformers and the multi-grounded neutral system, that brings a lot of these harmonics and noise into the earth and into our homes. Now, if they reconfigured the grid, less of that noise would go into the earth. So in that way, yes, they could reduce the amount of dirty electricity that we get onto our grounding system.
Okay. Now, you brought up the NCB. I want to get there in just a minute. But we talked about how the grid is not the grid. The utility company is producing clean power. Basically, they're taking some reasonable steps to try to balance it and keep it clean. They could be doing more, but basically, these problems, as you've explained them, are being introduced by us. By the consumer, based on what we're putting into our homes and how we're using it, and the builders, right, who are wiring these homes. You mentioned industrial standards, that the utilities themselves are sort of at the mercy of these standards. So why are these standards so lacking? And similarly, why are building codes so lacking when it comes to protecting us against the forces that create dirty electricity?
That's a really complex answer. I'll try to keep it very simple. There is extreme competition between manufacturers of products to make sure that they can deliver their stuff to the consumers as cheaply as possible. So a lot of the international bodies that regulate these standards of electromagnetic interference, EMI, are, their boards are stacked with people that are represented, the motors. So the ICNIRP, the international body that regulates this, whatever you want to call this bad energy that's radiating between motors or between wires, whatever it is, there's horror stories about what they'll be considering. Well, this energy is too much and is possibly, cancerous or precancerous, whatever it is, and then they'll back way off of it once they get a few phone calls from a couple of authorities or whatever it is. And so we can't do that because blah blah blah. So it's really not a health standard that's been established that's protective for people. But it's more for equipment. And the most aggressive one for equipment is called SEMI, the Standards for Electromagnetic Interference. And Vladimir Kratz is one of the premier people on that institution, trying to drive the argument so much more forward to get much more stringent standards. And so it's barely enough for machines. It's not even close for humans.
So, and before we move on, there was one time you mentioned the way in which you describe building code, that it was the bare minimum. What are the words you used?
Well, it's a race to the bottom. Basically, the National Electrical Code is a fire safety code. It's basically sponsored by insurance agencies. That is what electricians need to adhere to whenever they're doing any wiring. So the NEC is a minimum, a bare minimum that you are required when you're doing installation. So everybody is basically doing the least amount of possibly can to save money when they're doing installations. And once again, it's a fire code, has nothing to do with magnetic fields or electric fields. Unless you get into industrial stuff where they have more MC cable and it's metal, they'll start talking about magnetic fields a little bit because it starts to overheat the conductors. But in my work day to day, I try to pull out these code citations. Well, we can't do this. And they'll say, well, we're not using MC cable, we're not using metal clad. It's not, the magnetic fields aren't going to affect anything. It doesn't matter. So we need to have a health standard for human beings, not just for overheating and fires.
So we have these problems in the wiring in our home. You had these problems in the wiring in your home, and you've gone through the process of learning what they are, learning how to address them. But then you created this thing called the NCB Pro. And what I'm wondering as a starting point here to help clean the dirty electricity from your home. And so what I'm wondering here as a starting point is, why did you have to create the NCB Pro? Haven't there been dirty electricity filters available on the market now for decades?
Absolutely, and very good ones put out by Dave Stetzer and others for the hot and the neutral wire. There are three conductors in a basic circuit. The hot conductor brings the voltage out, and then the white wire, or the neutral, is the return current pathway. Same amount of current on the hot and the neutral. So the neutral is not a neutral wire. It's a current carrying conductor, and the same amount of current as on the hot. Now, the third wire is the grounding conductor, and the grounding conductor is basically a stopgap. It's fail safe. If one of the current carrying conductors touches the frame of something, that frame is bonded or attached to the grounding conductor, and then the grounding conductor would take that current back and trip your breaker. So it's a protective device. Now, that grounding conductor is never supposed to have current on it because it's touching surfaces. And I first was experimenting with grounding pads, bed sheets, and RF shielding that all required grounding. And I was getting very bad results. Using a bed sheet, I felt like hell for 30 days. And I was calling the guys up and going, something's got to be wrong here. And they go, no, it's a healing response. It's not a problem. So, and anyway,
Sorry,
It
we
should
had
hurt
to,
more. It's healing.
yeah.
we had to
No
rip our
pain, no
wall.
gain, Andrew.
Well, believe me, I'm the one that is willing to take more pain than anybody else if it's worth it. But I stuck with it and trying to think it would help. And after 10 years, well, anyway, long story short, we ripped our walls out for our copper shielding paint in our bedroom, because we could never, even though I brought in the country's best building biologists, we could never make it work with my grounding system. And that brought me to the position of the grounding system is destroyed. And I learned more and more about all of the things in the home that's dumping current. A lot of devices dump current onto the grounding system as just a normal course of events, but also the grid is directly connected to the power grid. There is no break in the wire, goes right out to the neutral, and the neutral goes right out to the high voltage part of the transformer. So we are inheriting everything onto our grounding system. And this is insane. As soon as I realized this,
sorry, please continue.
As soon as I realized this, I said, there has to be a way that I can insulate myself from the wide open ocean of the world and everybody else's problems. So the NCB became my solution to, help me in my home, because I actually had a bunch of current swimming from place to place inside my home that I needed to stop. So I did that. And now we're addressing the grid problem as well.
So, and just, we don't have to keep harping on this. And like you say, the dirty electricity filters on the market are high quality products from legit companies. But how did we go for decades where the companies addressing dirty electricity were leaving the grounding conductor totally unaddressed?
Well, I hope nobody gets pissed at me for saying this. Some of the dirty electricity don't use the grounding conductor. It's just a 2-prong filter.
Mm-hmm.
Some are 3-prong, and well, I'll just say some dirty electricity filters will throw their garbage onto the grounding conductor.
And why was that thought? And again, we're not trying to attack. I'm trying to get to the conceptions of the industry that you came along and have started sort of challenging and waking people up to. Why? It's just like, my father used to tell me that he, because he taught at Columbia University Medical School, and for decades he had taught that non-thermal levels of non-ionizing radiation were completely benign. They were completely safe until he discovered the work of Dr. Reba Goodman and went down this whole other path. So there was just this mindset that this type of radiation was safe. And I guess what I'm wondering is, what was the mindset that said dirty electricity on the hot and the neutral is something we have to address, but dirty electricity on the grounding conductor wasn't?
So a lot of the industry needed to do something with their noise, the harmonics that their machines and everything was creating. Now, the easiest thing to do it is to what's called shunt it or short it. Just dump it onto the grounding conductor. That's how you can get it out of the hot and neutral. It's the easiest thing to do, is just, that's where it's going to disappear to. So your lines will clean up, your motor will run better. So it's basically the dumping ground, literally. Then dealing with the filtering, you'll have much better options for the hot and the neutral to get clean if you can dump the energy somewhere else rather than keep the energy where it is and then manage it. Mm-hmm. Some companies, they burn it off as heat, so you're wasting energy. Or it's a negotiation. What are you going to do with these current spikes. That's literally current that is not at 60 hertz, but it's all the way over here. Where's it going to go? I mean, you can use it or you can lose it. So it's a sliding scale of money of how effective can you get.
No, that's okay. So we now have the NCB Pro, which you designed and invented and have filed for the patent on, that you designed to improve your own life, and then you've started using it for your clients, your customers at home EMF tracing. As a starting point here of this part of the discussion, there are two, in broad terms, there are two versions of the NCB. There's the NCB Pro, and then there's just the NCB, which has a plug, which you can plug into an outlet. What, in as simple terms as possible, what are the differences, or what is the key difference between the NCB and the NCB Pro?
Good. So let's leave the Pro out for a second, because Pro means that you need a professional to install it, and few people are ready for that sort of commitment, but it's absolutely necessary. So let's just talk about the NCB. The NCB is a plug. It's basically little blocks that just sticks into an outlet. And the beautiful thing about the NCB is it has a dial in it that is basically adjusts resistance on the grounding conductor. So that means how much current will flow. A lot of people use grounding mats and they're trying to optimize their office area to feel better. So in their office area, they're going to have electric fields radiating off of wires, off of appliances, off of whatever it is. And they feel bad, so they buy a grounding mat in order to bleed away this electric field. Electric fields have a property of basically they jump out and cling onto things. So they're going to jump onto the body and just hovering around the body. So if they touch a grounding mat or something, it then leaks or bleeds away from them and they feel better. They don't get charged up like a battery anymore or have inflammation. So it's bleeding away from them. But the problem is, as soon as they touch the grounding mat, current is literally flowing through them, or the grounding system is dirty and they're basically getting electrocuted very slowly. So the current is the killer. So what the dial does is, at what point does the current go down, 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 off? There's no current, so you're not getting electrocuted, but I can still bleed away the electric field. There's a sweet spot. So that's the beauty of the NCB, is you just plug it into the wall and then you just turn the dial. There's more equipment to actually tell you the sweet spot, but some people just turn it to one way or the other, and they use their body as it does, feels good. Or if it doesn't feel good, turn it the other way. And that's the simplest thing to do.
So I need to interrupt. With the NCB, the NCB plug, I understand that this is specifically for grounding products. Could I put it into like a power strip and then, or plug a power strip into it and then use it for multiple products? Or what is the best use case that this is specifically designed for?
Yes, you can plug it into a power strip and, ground a whole bunch of things into it. I don't recommend them with appliances. Let's say your computer is being charged by a 3-prong plug, and you stick that 3-prong plug into my NCB or into the NCB, because then it's still going to start choking the electric field coming back from your computer. But that's what we want. We want the electric field coming out of your computer. So that's not a good route. I would say put the computer plugged into a normal outlet and let that current on that grounding system get away from you. So the electric field is pulled away from you. But if you're going to, if for whatever reason you want to use a grounding mat, or you're going to do anything else with your body touching anything that's electrical, there's the key. If your body's not touching anything electrical, then I don't want to get complicated at this point. But in general, don't use the NCB with appliances, but use it when you are touching something. So it's for making sure you don't get current in your body.
Okay.
Now, you can use an NCB in a garage, on a really noisy refrigerator and you're not going to be around it or something like that, you can choke a lot of current off the grounding system of that very noisy appliance, but you better not be touching that, because we're going to be choking the current that's leaking out of it into the house. And if you touch the appliance, then the potential is for it to go to your body. So there's just keep those two things separate. There's always an exception to the rule, and I don't want to get too complicated with
No,
people.
I think that was really good. I think that was very specific. If you're touching it, so that's where a grounding blanket or something, that's
grounding
more
sheets, a grounding mat. Yeah.
Right.
And so, Andrew, just
That
to
makes
clarify,
sense. Thank you.
because Stephanie, that was a good question. So you can take a power strip and plug it into the NCB, and then use that single NCB to clean multiple human grounding products?
Yes. The one problem would be is if, let's say, if you don't mind, let me draw a picture. Let me just put it up here, because
and again, everybody, this will be in the video on our YouTube channel.
So if you have one little outlet, can you see my little drawing here?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, sure can.
All right, so you have an outlet, and then you have the NCB, and it's got these two little prongs, and it sticks into here. Now, out of the back is another little outlet. So, and you have this device go to this grounding mat, and it's however you want to think of it. Let's say there's a power strip or something. This plugs into the power strip. You have multiple outlets. So you have all these different devices. And that's fine if they're completely separate. Each one of them would be controllable. Actually, they're all going to be controlled by one dial. So basically, you'll be limited of one setting for all three, but it still works. Let's say you wanted to turn it all the way to the left. That's the most amount of current, and but it will suck away the electric fields as much as possible. Maybe that's a good environment for you, or you want to do the opposite. You want to block as much current as possible. Now, it's all good. Now, the one issue that I have found is if these two items somehow touch, you can see that there is a circle made here. And now these things will start to communicate. These guys will start to have a life of their own. No longer are they going to be protected only from here in and out between this here, but these guys could start to play. So it's unknown what the source would be on this would be A, this would be B, and C. Between A and B grounding mats, they will have their circulation themselves.
Yeah. So if you, as the user, were touching, so you have two grounding, let's just for simplicity, two grounding mats. They're plugged into a power strip. The power strip is plugged into the NCV. If you're touching both of those grounding mats, you're creating a circuit, and then you get unpredictable outcomes.
Correct, because there would be communication between the A power strip or A mat and B mat. Now, if there's no connection between them, then A would be all by itself, and you would have no problems there. So I just don't want the loop or the extra circuit.
No, this is great. Thank you.
You're
welcome. Okay, so stepping back then to the other half of my question 2 or 3 questions ago. So we've covered the NCB, and that's to make grounding your body safer by reducing your exposure to these toxic pollutants that are on your home's electrical system. Now, what's the Pro?
Yes, the Pro is for foreign current entering your electrical system. A foreign current source would be like a well pump, and a well pump is it's a big ground rod in the earth, and there's current flowing through the earth because of the power grid, the way it's configured. So you have current that wants to come in and out of your house through the well, and that comes into the grounding system of your home, and it will go back to the grid through your ground rod at your neutral ground connection, because every house has basically a ground rod at its service where the electric meter is. So there's one earth reference point. If you have 2 earth reference points, a well and your electrical service, you're guaranteed to have current swimming through your home. And all of your grounding system is pretty much has current swimming all over it. So the NCB Pro is you put it on that well pump and you stop the circuit, and you can stop that foreign current.
And so the NCB Pro is, so the NCB, the regular NCB, the NCB plug, that's to make it safer to ground your body using these various grounding products. And you could use a power strip to do multiples, or you can get multiple NCBs and plug them into different outlets. But they're really trying to make a specific product safer for you to use. The Pro is the solution if you wanted to clean your entire home. But in a lot of cases, it's not just a single Pro. That if you did really want to clean your entire home, in a lot of cases, you would need more than one Pro. So how do you go about figuring out how many NCB Pros you need to accomplish your goals?
You hire an electrician, or you get one of our qualified experts to work with your electrician to do basically a panel diagnostic. We have to find what are the current sources. There could be sources from inside the home, a dryer or some other wiring problem that's dumping current onto your grounding system. And a lot of those can be fixed, so we don't have an inside contribution to that. And then when the power is completely off to all the breakers and you amp clamp over your neutral that's coming in and out of your house, there should be no current on it, but there's always current on it. So we have to figure out, is that circuit goes down to the ground rod outside and there's none of it's coming through the home, or what's the pathway through the home? Because there should be no current coming through the grounding system of the home, period. But if there is, then you basically, with an amp clamp, you find which circuit has the current on the grounding conductor. And that gets a little bit confusing or convoluted. And this is why I recommend people to do a meter/disconnect combo, because you're basically testing only one wire to your main panel that has all your grounding conductors on it. Now, a lot of people have a main breaker that has all the neutrals and all the grounds all in the same bus bars, and you literally have to pull one conductor at a time, and it's a nightmare.
Now, you mentioned at the start that the Pro requires professional installation. And now you just talked about these NCB qualified experts that you have trained and worked with, which will also explain how people can find those. But why does the Pro require professional installation? I think you started to get to that with your last answer here, but let's just say it explicit. Why does the Pro require professional installation?
You're going to be dealing with a breaker panel, which in one part of this may be live in order to find what appliance is actually leaking current to your grounding system, and it's in the on position. So dealing with the panel cover off, it's a very, very dangerous situation. I don't want any homeowner that's not trained getting into the electric panel, even though they can if they want, that's what they choose to do. I do not recommend it. And in fact, even for seasoned electricians, I'm constantly surprised. You know, I'm working with an electrician, or I'm out in the field myself, and I swear to God, I thought that thing was off, and I fortunately had a glove on or something. That thing is live and it's sparking or whatever, or I walk by it and my arm was, what the heck was that? That's a live wire. That thing is just burned my arm. So there's, even for professionals, there are a lot of dangerous things, and especially if you're putting something back together. If you unscrewed anything, you have to know how to address these wires and put them back correctly. So that's why I only recommend use an electrician to do this work.
Okay, and I hope everyone's taking that super seriously. And in fact, when you buy it, you have to check a box saying that you recognize that you're going to have professional installation. And there's one more really key question that I think a lot of people have when they learn about the NCB Pro and they're considering it in their own home is, right, because there's two main versions, right? So what's the difference between these two versions?
One of the versions is basically for your inside appliances. Something's leaking, and it's a 120 volt appliances. It's no big deal. It's, you know, every time it runs, it kicks, you know, 25 to 50 milliamps onto my grounding system, and I want to choke that. So I install it on the grounding conductor. And remember, the NCB still maintains an effective ground fault path. If there's something over 60 volts made an inappropriate connection, the breaker will trip. So we're not cutting your protection. We're actually protecting you, and it's ready for that breaker to snap when it has to. The other version is for a lot of people are doing RF shielding, but not bonding it or grounding it to their home grounding system. They're establishing a brand new one by adding a ground rod out in the yard. So now you have, remember, 2 earth reference points, and you are guaranteed to have current trying to interact between these 2 systems. So it gets a little convoluted, and Rex Funks has done a great job in his presentation explaining ways to configure this. But the NCB 240 volt version is over the voltages from the home. So your breakers will all work and nothing will push out into the yard if something is activated in a ground fault situation. If there is a lightning strike, that energy is going to surge into a person's RF shielding, and it will jump to the home electrical and possibly cause a fire. Installing the NCB 240 out there, the desperate situations for these 2 systems to start to interact, but the rest of the time it keeps surges from current interacting with your grounding system. Unless there's a very, very high surge that would cause a fire, it allows it to go. And then in the room that's shielded, we have another NCB that allows this energy to ensure that this system has the breaker, or somehow that energy can be dissipated to the home electrical grounding system. It gets very complicated, but basically what we're trying to do is not have an arc jumping of electricity, but we're providing a path in an emergency.
Okay, that makes sense, and that was a good kind of example of needing multiple NCB pros in your home. So I live in an apartment, and I'm listening to this, and I'm like, this sounds great. I don't know that I have control over those not appliances, but systems. Can I use this in an apartment? What would your
NCB Pro would be something that you would pull out whenever you find, wow, you've got a furnace. Whenever it runs, it has a transformer in it that is unfortunately carrying current to the frame of your transformer. So every time it runs, a 0.5 amp of current is now on your coolant line and all of the other stuff. And that coolant line or whatever is going right by the head of your bed. And every time that you are trying to sleep, and every time the furnace kicks on, you have this gigantic magnetic field that's kicked up carrying current, and you get woken up. So if you put the NCB on that line that is able to block that current pathway towards your head, and you can either redirect it or whatever, there's other solutions, but you are going to block a pathway carrying current and stop that magnetic field so you can get some sleep.
So, but was that the NCB or the NCB Pro in that example?
It would be the NCB Pro.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about the NCB plug?
No, well, sure. But I just want to nutshell that one. So there are instances in which it is possible to use an NCB Pro in an apartment setting.
Absolutely. Basically, the scenario I just gave you is the most likely one. Where is that foreign current or internal current that's going to be disturbing your sleep or some area? After that, there's not much you can do in an apartment unless you're using grounding mats. Then you use the plug, and then you're going to protect yourself from everybody else's current that's swimming around the whole apartment. The apartment complexes or condos are like a disaster, and unfortunately, people are like, "This, I have to stay here, and I have to do this. What are my options?" I said, "Great. Now that you have that, we have to diagnose and get rid of as much of the local problems, wiring problems, and whatever you're going to inherit into this room, we need to stop this current from entering your bedroom. How are we going to do that? So here's the one line that comes into your bedroom. If we put an NCB Pro on that line, that current or that voltage or that wave coming around your sleeping area will be stopped."
Okay, well, thank you for that. I appreciate the answer, and I want to. If you're in an apartment, also, you probably will need to, speak with management to make sure you can do these things. But that sounds that was a really really excellent answer. And while you were answering, I had this question occurred to me. If I'm not electrically sensitive, do I need to worry about dirty electricity?
Well, in my opinion, everybody is electrically sensitive to some point.
Hmm.
And it's how much the word is perceptive or perception. The power company believes that the level of perception is the level of problem. So
Hmm.
if you don't perceive it, there's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
So this, of course, is a very huge sliding scale. So if you're not perceptive of any problem, you're just working away or something like that, I usually can ask a person a number of questions and they go, well, of course, everybody feels that way. Of course,
Yeah.
everybody feels eye burn or their ear gets hot after my cell phone. Of course, that's just normal. So I'm not a sick person. I'm not weak. So there's like a thick layer of blocking of if you get electrically sensitive, that means that you're weak and you should die because you're a sick cow and you should, you're not whatever. So it's really not that. I mean, the body is trying to help people all the time. And maybe that little bit of a headache or that little bit of brain fog or that little bit of just irritation. Blood sugar spike is a very, very common response of the brain. The glucose metabolism increases incredibly around a cell phone or high electric fields. And people just realize, yeah, my wife and I, we often will fight whenever we're both in the kitchen. And I go, look, you got this huge bundle of wires right underneath, right where you sit or you stand at the sink. Whoever's standing at the sink more than 5 minutes is probably going to get either have a blood sugar crash, become irritated. And, just I could analyze on and on and on. It's like, now that I think about it, wow. So, and sleep problems are a big one. So everybody just thinks, oh, I have sleep apnea just because, blah, blah, blah. No, turn the power off. And they didn't have a bunch of alcohol or a bunch of cake that night or whatever it is. Just the power, the electric field around their head of their bed was
Yeah.
causing inflammation of all these systems. And just by turning the power off, the guy goes, wow, I slept so much better.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, there when you're listing off some of these things, I'm like, "Oh yeah, I do dismiss them." And I think that that's common to dismiss and not say, "Oh, this may be," or especially not think that it's your electrical system. But I also really appreciate you saying that the problem is connected to perception and perceiving. And I wonder, maybe you're not somebody who's perceiving that you have a sensitivity. Are there long-term effects to this, these types of exposures?
Absolutely. I've just read a couple of great books on basically power line frequencies. And it's a really interesting analogy for everything that's going on because people that live next to power station or they're underneath the power line will have these horrible diseases. I mean, it's these horrible things. It's like a nightmare. Even the 18-year-old girls, just like, oh my God. But what if the person doesn't have to die from leukemia? What if they don't have to die from cancer? What if they don't have this huge tumor or whatever removed from their brain? What's in the middle ground? And now we're talking about chronic fatigue. We're talking about these long-term, um, you know, symptoms that will alter a person's life, their lifestyle, their relationships, their jobs, all these other intangible. How do you calculate the living under a power line if it didn't kill you through cancer, leukemia, or some other horrible fatigue disease? It does have a long-term effect upon a person's life that is just basically eating away their energy. So how do you calculate that? Now, there are many diseases that are, in my opinion, proven without a doubt. If you have leukemia, you better look at why are your white blood cells, why is your immune system being compromised? What is the thing that is breaking your immune system? It's just not what you're supposed to be getting as a child or as an adult. So cancer is always the thing. If you have cancer, blah, blah, blah. Well, it doesn't have to be cancer. Epstein-Barr is the precursor to cancer, and Epstein-Barr is like one of the most key related responses, immune systems, infections the body gets around Wi-Fi and other types of electrical frequencies. And I can go on and on with all kinds of different infections.
What is Epstein-Barr? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Epstein-Barr virus is just one of those, another annoying infections that makes people very puffy-eyed and irritated, blood sugar and chronic fatigue. And it's a precursor to MS, multiple sclerosis, and cancer. And, along with Lyme disease and mold, this seems to be the triumvirate, just these three things that I find in electrically sensitive people. If they don't have one or three of them, it's going to be one or all three with electrically sensitive people. They're going to be in some sort of a chronic fatigue mode related to an Epstein-Barr infection, or they had some mold sensitivity or exposure, and the mold is in the background giving them all kinds of horrible symptoms, or they have a simmering Lyme type infection. And I can go from there, but that's just, I want to give people, wow, I never thought that, Lyme was related to electrical sensitivity, or mold was electrical sensitivity, or MS. And basically, electrical sensitivity is the body saying, I've had enough, you idiot. I'm going to wake you up and I'm going to spank you, bang, slap you, wake up, please. This is your problem. Get this energy away from us because it's stimulating this infection.
Yeah, I've heard you and others, but you refer to electrical sensitivity as a canary in the coal mine condition, that it's an early warning sign that there's something worse happening. And we actually just, as you know, we just ran the Healthier Tech Summit, and there were several talks commenting on the mold issues becoming worse and worse in people's health now. So it's not like this is always, mold has never been healthy, but apparently the data that people are anecdotally reporting is that mold is becoming more toxic, or we are becoming more sensitive to the mold that's around us.
Our immune system is being broken more and more. There's just more and more things that are destroying our immune system. Electromagnetic frequencies are only one of them, and I haven't completed my research on this, but there are some enzymes and there's some receptors, and I wish I had all the words for all the medical people, but it just seems that power line frequencies, especially large magnetic fields, and now they're doing much more research into 5G frequencies and all these other kinds of things, break the immune system in a specific way that can be recognized more and more now, that if you have this sort of immune compromised situation, you really should look at electromagnetic exposure. But we don't have to go there to try to say that you have a health problem. I want to flip it on its head. It's a biologically adaptive benefit being electrically sensitive, because the body is then slapping you saying, stop that. Where you are going to develop an advanced disease if you keep going that. So we have this friend that's developed our bacteria. I believe it's our bacteria is really waking us up, is helping us become more and more rational, because it's so easy to be swept away with the conveniences of cell phones and the power grid. But I think our microbiome has just had enough.
So to bring this portion of the conversation, sort of put a nice little bow on it, we started by talking about the gaps in dirty electricity filtration that you engineered a very innovative solution to. Just so people understand, right? So the NCB alone, or the NCB Pro alone, won't solve all the dirty electricity in your house. A traditional dirty electricity filter clearly won't solve all the dirty electricity problems in your house. So the natural question that many listeners would have is it possible to use the NCB Pro or the NCB alongside a more traditional dirty electricity filter? Like, for instance, I think you actually were telling me you did this recently for a client of yours with the NCB Pro and a static.
Absolutely. In fact, I have in my house. So there are different problems. Different wiring problems create different scenarios. So we had a wiring problem in the home that made more current onto the grounding system when there was a filter. We fixed the wiring problem, and the current going to the grounding system went away with the filter. So this is just reality. I'm sorry if anybody in the filtering world has a problem with this. Filters can make things worse.
Just 1 second before you continue. I think in any form of EMF remediation, if done, without a full understanding of the context in which you're putting it in, like if you put EMF, Y shield paint, which works really well, but if you put it on a wall and you didn't take into account factors X, Y, and Z, that can make things worse. It's any form of EMF protection has the potential, if done incorrectly, to make things worse.
Absolutely, and I train my people not to use the NCB in certain situations too, because I don't want to even get into that condition unless we've really done our homework and cleaned up the electrical work in the home. You can't just come into a home that's horrible and just install a bunch of filters and try to expect to feel better. You start with a wiring diagnostic. You fix the wiring problems first before you do anything else. And then you start to take care of, okay, you got your nonlinear loads, you got your dirty electricity, you got your current on your grounding system from the grid. Now we have targeted solutions that are going to benefit a person, and then they'll start to feel better. I can't tell you how many clients I've come in and I see tens of thousands of dollars of really expensive filtration equipment on their, and they feel like crap. Yeah. So they call me in to help it feel better. And it's like, you should have started with this and then did this and then did this, and then you could have, maybe spent half as much of that money.
So so your point being, get a real professional in who can actually diagnose actually what's happening in the house, address the problems at the source to the extent that you can do so, and then whatever's left over, you can use targeted solutions such as the NCB or NCB Pro, as well as a traditional dirty electricity filter like a static if appropriate. And that is the approach. And all of these can work together, but it has to be designed and implemented by a professional who really understands these issues. And like I was saying, any form of EMF protection can be harmful if done incorrectly. I will add to that, but once you start getting into electricity, it gets way more complicated. Because EMF, it's not a simple topic. EMF protection is not a simple topic, but once you have to start learning the details of the power grid and how electrical wiring really works and the unanticipated byproducts and so forth, that is super complex stuff. And there's really not a whole lot of people with your particular set of expertise, even within the EMF community, because the electrical issues are so much more complicated.
Right. And in closing, from my perspective, treat your grounding system like you do a gun. It's loaded all the time. Your grounding system is loaded with current. It's dangerous right now. So you want to treat it as therapy. You want to connect your body to it. Whoever's selling you the products needs to have a caveat saying, check your wiring first. Do you have current on your grounding? Yes, you do. Until proven otherwise, your grounding system is dirty and it's dangerous.
Wow. Well, Andrew, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. That was a very strong closing, by the way. Well done. Thank you. But yeah, no, you and I have known each other now for a few years, and it's always a pleasure to catch up with you. It's a pleasure to work with you. For people who want to learn more about the NCB itself, you can go, and we'll have these links in the show notes, but it's shieldyourbody.com/ground. That's also where you can find the list of the NCB qualified experts that Andrew has worked with that can help you with your installation of the NCB Pro. And then in addition, as I was just saying, Andrew has a really deep set of knowledge in an area that a lot of people don't, as it relates to EMF exposure and the wiring in your home. And he offers those services through his consulting company, homeemftracing.com, where he also has a growing set of learning materials, videos, webinars, ebooks, all available for sale on his store. So that's homeemftracing.com. Andrew, thank you so much for coming out today.
It is my pleasure, R. And I have to say, thank you to Stephanie. Thank you to R. You have taken such an amazing, God, you take a hit, literally. You guys are taking out my garbage. I've created a lot of people that have a lot of questions, and you manage them. You really support people in a tremendous way. You're doing a tremendous service. I couldn't get my products out there without you. So thank you so very much.
Well, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. And it's always great to talk to you. I always learn something, and then I get reminded of some other things, but it's always a treat to talk to you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Healthier Tech Podcast. Remember to check the show notes for all the links and resources mentioned in the show. Please like and subscribe to the Healthier Tech Podcast on Apple, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice. Get your free quick start guide to building a healthier relationship with technology and our latest information at healthiertech.co.